It was my first week working the night shift at St. Mary's Hospital, and I was assigned to the morgue. The morgue was in the basement, a cold, sterile place with flickering fluorescent lights and a constant hum from the refrigeration units. I was alone that night, cataloging bodies and updating records, when I heard it, a faint tapping sound. At first, I thought it was just the pipes or the old building settling, but the tapping grew louder, more rhythmic, like someone was knocking from inside one of the drawers. My heart started racing as I followed the sound to the far corner of the room. The tapping was coming from drawer 13. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the handle. I told myself it was just my imagination, but the tapping turned into a frantic pounding. I pulled the drawer open, and my blood ran cold. The body inside was supposed to be an elderly man who had passed away earlier that day, but his eyes were wide open, staring straight at me, and his mouth was moving, forming silent words. I slammed the drawer shut and backed away, my hands trembling. The next morning, I told my supervisor what had happened. She went pale and told me that drawer 13 had a history of strange occurrences. Years ago, a patient had been mistakenly declared dead and woke up in the morgue. He didn't survive the ordeal, and ever since, staff had reported hearing tapping from that drawer. I never worked in the morgue again, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still hear that tapping, and I wonder if he's still trying to get out. It was my shift at the hospital, just like any other. The halls were quiet, the lights dimmed for the night. I was making my rounds when I noticed something strange. Room 214. The door was slightly ajar. Now I'd been working there for months, and I'd never seen that door before. It was at the end of a long, empty hallway, tucked away like it didn't want to be found. But there it was, the number 214, faintly glowing under the flickering light. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was empty, completely empty. The bed was perfectly made, the sheets crisp and white. No 4 bags, no monitors, no sign that anyone had ever been there. But I could have sworn I'd heard someone call for help just moments before. I checked the patient chart. Blank. Not a single note, not even a name. I went to my supervisor, my hands still shaking. Room 214, I said. There's no one in there, but the door was open. What's going on? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Room 214? She said. There is no room 214 in this hospital. I froze. That couldn't be right. I'd just been in there. I'd seen it. I ran back to the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. But when I got there, the door was gone. Just a solid wall. I stared at it, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. I ran my hands over the surface, searching for some kind of seam, some proof that I wasn't going crazy. But there was nothing. Just cold, unbroken concrete. I asked around. No one knew what I was talking about. No one had ever heard of room 214, but I couldn't let it go. A few days later, I went digging through the hospital archives, and that's when I found it. An old newspaper article, yellowed with age. It was about a patient who had disappeared from room 214 decades ago. The article said the room had been sealed off after the incident, all records erased. The hospital had tried to bury it, to pretend it never happened, but I'd seen it. I'd been inside. I quit my job soon after. I couldn't stay there, not after what I'd seen. But even now, years later, I still have nightmares about that room. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, convinced I can hear someone calling for help. A faint, desperate voice, coming from behind a wall that shouldn't exist. And I can't help but wonder, what happened to the patient who disappeared? And why did the room choose to show itself to me? I was working the night shift in the ICU. It's a place where life and death hang in the balance every single day. But that night, I saw something I'll never forget. It was around 3 a.m. The unit was quiet, almost too quiet. Only a few patients were hooked up to monitors, their steady beeps filling the silence. I was checking on one of them, a man in his 60s, when I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow. It was in the far corner of the room, just beyond the dim glow of the monitors. At first, I thought it was nothing, just a trick of the light, maybe my tired eyes playing tricks on me. But as I turned to leave, the shadow moved. It slid across the wall, slow and deliberate, like it was alive. My breath caught in my throat as it stopped just behind the patient's bed. And then, it leaned forward. I can't explain what I saw next. The shadow wasn't just a shadow anymore. It had a shape, a twisted, unnatural form that seemed to pulse and writhe as it hovered over the patient. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, as the shadow stretched out a long, thin arm and touched the patient's chest. The monitor flatlined. The shrill, piercing sound snapped me out of my trance. I called for help, my voice shaking, but by the time my colleagues rushed in, the shadow was gone. We tried everything to revive the patient, but it was too late. They were gone. The next morning, I couldn't shake what I'd seen. I started asking questions, digging into the patient's history. That's when I found out the truth. The patient had been a former hospital employee. Years ago, they had died in the ICU, right in that same room. And ever since, staff had reported seeing a shadowy figure in the unit. Always at night, always just before a patient passed away. I quit the ICU after that. I couldn't go back, not after what I'd seen. But sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still feel it. That presence, that shadow. And I can't help but wonder, is it still there, waiting for its next victim? Or worse, is it following me? Hospitals are supposed to be places of healing, but sometimes they hold secrets, shadows that linger, rooms that shouldn't exist, and voices that refuse to be silenced. If you ever find yourself walking through a quiet hospital hallway late at night, listen closely. You might hear the tapping, you might see the shadow, or you might find a door that wasn't there before. And when you do, remember this: not everything in a hospital is meant to be found.